I'm Brittany, this is Chuaneng, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch and read gay things. We are continuing to read Volume 8 of Erha today. A lot of things are being revealed and discussed in this volume. Many things. So many things. We're on page 97 for chapter 252, which is called Soul Splitting, because at this point we know that somebody got split, and not in the usual way that we've seen people split in this series. We just need to know the details, and evidently we're getting those details. So hello, welcome to the stream today. We read for a couple of hours. We typically read between 40 and 50 pages, and according to Love for helping me out and getting me page estimates, etc., we should be reading 48 today. So we're going to try to keep the histrionics to a little bit more of a minimum so that we can get through that in 2 hours and not like 2.5. But we take a break around halfway through for a few minutes where we go back to the Gaywatch break room, which is where you were just a couple of minutes ago. And what else was there? Trigger warnings down in the description. And the Gaywatch Discord down in the description. One of these days, I will have an actual opening stream script that I know in my soul, and I'll be able to just say, like a YouTuber or whatever. Today's evidently not that day. I'm closer than I usually am, though, because I do kind of have a little checklist of things that I'm supposed to say before we get started reading for today. Number one, because I never say this, like the stream. If you like Erha, if you like Gaywatch, if you like Erha and Gaywatch, give the stream a like. It helps it out. It helps me out. It helps Gaywatch out. And I never remember to say it. So please, like the stream if you have a good time. Also, another thing that I never mention is that I have another link in the description box. And it is down below under the support. And it's for the Amazon wish list. And I never bring it up here. And I don't really know why, because basically everything on it is stuff that helps the stream, the reading streams, or just filming in general. It's all very channel-based stuff. I don't just have a bunch of random things in there. The Amazon wishlist has things like a light that I need to improve lighting. There's a thing called a Steam Deck that basically lets you do multiple commands in just one keystroke. That's really great for making streams more seamless, and then I'd be able to do more with a stream if I had a Stream Deck at my desk. That's on there as well. There's like hats and just little fun stuff. That's also where the volumes of danmei are, and the last 2 volumes of Erha are up there, and including there are 1 or 2 other series that's also up there. And it's just a lovely way to help out the channel. It really makes a huge difference in how I do things and how I can. And I always forget to shout it out, but that exists. By the way, the Amazon wishlist down in the description box. One of these days, I'll be a YouTuber who has her shit together. And then also, lastly, and quickly before we start reading, if you are an American who is registered to vote, today is an election day and is likely an election day in your state. So check that out and head to your polling place at some time before polls close and cast your vote. There's a lot of things on the ballot in a lot of different states. Me specifically, I'm in North Carolina, and I'll be voting to keep my Democrat mayor in office when I get off of the stream today. So please shout out and vote if you are possible and able. And now we're going to start reading this lovely chapter, which the more I read of this series in general, the more that I am never at ease. Doesn't matter what's happening. I was pretty anxious throughout the entirety of what was it, Volume 5, and Volume 5 was lovely. That was just a good, wholesome time for the most part. And I never rested because she never wants you to. And so if you think I'm going to rest now, No. It's only going to get worse. The anxiety is only going to get worse. The anxiety only stops when the story is over. And I know that Meat Bun can't hurt me anymore. With Erha, anyway. So. The two youths were engrossed in conversation, smiling easily as they chatted. At one point, Shuimeng reached up to tuck a little white and yellow flower in Shimei's hair. Shimei, simultaneously exasperated and amused, reached up to pluck it out again, sending Shuimeng into a fit of laughter. Ah, Shizun? It was too late to avoid them. When Shuimeng turned, he'd already seen Chu Wanning out of the corner of his eye. After a moment of shock, he hurried forward and exclaimed, Pardon me. He hurried forward and exclaimed, I didn't expect to see Shizun out so late. Shimei followed with a gentle smile. Good evening, Shizun. Chu Wanning found himself unable to speak. He'd intended to answer as if it was the most natural thing in the world, but before he could open his mouth, the rims of his eyes reddened. Luckily, the night was dark enough to hide it. Shuimeng's eyes shone with a kitten-like curiosity. Where are you going, Shizun? Just... Chu Wanning's voice came out as a hideous rasp. He cleared his throat, but it was a moment before he could continue. Just taking a walk. After another beat, he couldn't help asking, What about you two? Go! Art! You know what's funny? I saw through the first page of the chapter, that there would be art on the other side. Did I realize that it would naturally then be art of this moment? Not at all. No. Here. Art. Lovely art to go with the difficult emotions that are happening to Chu Wanning right now. Like, he's just come from the worst timeline and is now confronted with, students who should be dead. This is a perfectly happy story. Us? We just got back from Wuchang Town. We brought back loads of delicious snacks. Shuimeng was in high spirits. There was a temple festival today. It was tons of fun. Had they been talking to the Chu Wanning from this timeline, the conversation would have ended there. He wouldn't have cared to know more about these boys' amusements, what delicious foods they'd eaten, why they were so happy. At that time, he'd been cool and distant with everyone. He'd never liked to pry into anyone's personal business. But the Chu Wanning who had traveled back in time found every word, every smile, every twinkle in the eyes of Shuimeng and Shimei to be unspeakably precious. He wanted one more glimpse of them, wanted to listen to them talk a little longer. After all, he no longer had any such opportunities in his world. Man, we're like a page into this chapter. I'm gonna need her to calm down. My eyes are fine. They're not glossy. We're only a page into the chapter. Why would my eyes be glossy? So he asked, what did you get? Does Shizun want to see? Plainly delighted, Shuimeng drew a handful of items from his Changkun pouch, presenting them like precious baubles. Hawthorn rolls, pine nut pastries, sweet osmanthus candies. He rattled off a list, then grabbed a fistful of osmanthus candies and thrust them into Chu Wanning's empty hands. I got too many. These are for you, Shizun. Side note, has there ever been a moment where Mo Run clocked a kindness from Chu Wanning to Shuimeng and Shimei that wasn't offered to him? I'm excessively paranoid about where this moment plays out in the timeline that we're familiar with. So yeah, see, and I was right, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah, blue terms, at least perceived. Like, I'm looking for a moment where that Mo-Run would look at and go, oh, see, this is Chuaning being nice to them, but not to me. Not knowing that it was the Chuaning from another timeline. That's what I'm looking for. Chimay also rummaged through his pouch, but it seemed he hadn't bought much. Unable to find anything worth giving to Chuaning, his ears turned faintly pink. I don't need any more, said Chuaning. He took a few candies and handed the rest back to Shuimeng. His eyes glimmered softly beneath the moonlight. This is plenty. He knew the space-time gate could close at any moment. He was already overdrawing Jige's power. It would be tremendously difficult to open a second rift. Besides, he only had this single stolen night. Taishanjun might become suspicious if he was gone for too long. Quashing the tumult in his heart, he asked, Where's Mo-Run? Didn't he go out with you? Shuimeng and Chimay exchanged a glance. We haven't seen him since lunch, said Shuimeng. He hasn't spent much time with us recently, Chimay added. He's probably busy with his own things. Chuaning went to the disciples' quarters and then the temple festival, but Mo-Run was nowhere to be found. As the hours passed, Chuaning grew more and more anxious. Brow furrowed, he pondered all sorts of possibilities, until he suddenly remembered. Surely Mo-Run wouldn't have gone to... Chuaning didn't complete the thought. Even the memory made him rather uncomfortable. His face darkened, fingers curling into fists. There was one place in particular that Mo-Run frequented often when he'd first started going astray. That's a scene break. Are we about to get Chuaning in a brothel? Wait. Wait a second. Are we about to get Chuaning in a brothel? I think we're about to get Chuaning in a brothel. We're about to get Chuaning in a brothel. Okay. An hour later, Chuaning stood outside a building of red and purple lacquered wood. Above its doors hung a scarlet plaque that read, May you feast on the peaches of immortality. This was a well-known entertainment house in the nearby Black Bamboo town, the Immortal Peach Pavilion. It was now deep in the night, yet here things were just beginning to get lively. Guests streamed through the doors, most of them either greasy-looking older men or dolled-up youngsters. And then there was Chuaning, sticking out like a sore thumb with his austere expression and rigid posture. Welcome, please come in, an attendant called out at the door. Take a look around. Today we have a famous dawn singer. That comes with a footnote. A dawn singer is a female role in many genres of Chinese opera. Okay, thank you. We have a famous dawn singer from Shangtan. She sings like Xun Fengro and dances like Duan Yuhan. Come see the show, just 80 copper coins, 10 more for a front row seat. A sophisticated-looking Gongzhou waving a calligraphed? Calligraphed. I don't know why my brain does not want to say that. Calligraphed. Because it's like calligraphy, but then it's calligraph, so calligraphed feels wrong. Wow. I just had a real four-way collision in my head there. Fan jeered as he walked by. How shameless. Who are you calling a famous Don? You dare compare her with the bygone goddesses, Duan Yuhan and Xun Fengro? That's right. 80 coins, and they have the cheek to mention her in the same breath as Xun Fengro. Even 800 gold couldn't buy you one of Xun Fengro's performances. This old circus is scamming people again. A passing night watchman chimed in with a guffaw, scratching his armpit. Now curious, Chu Wanning lifted the curtain and walked in. Silk lanterns were strung up across the bustling hall, which was filled with people watching shows and drinking wine, losing themselves in a billowing sea of rouge and paint. The singers' voices had the luster of gold, and the rent boys' muscles flexed alluringly beneath jade-like skin. On stage, a woman dressed as an imperial consort was drunkenly sprawled within a lush tableau. The opera singer's every gesture was heaving with sorrow, moving many in her audience to tears. Amazing! One more song! One more song! Chu Wanning knit his brows at the cloying scent of powder and perfume. His phoenix eyes scanned the crowd, but there was no sign of Mo-Run. Had he come to the wrong place? The brothel madam, busy with the crush of guests, chose that moment to notice Chu Wanning amidst the crowd. She swooped over like a glittering butterfly, vermilion lips parting in a coy smile. Gongcha, please step up to watch the show, or head inside if you're seeking other pleasures. Chu Wanning shot her a cool glance. I'm looking for someone. Looking for... The madam paused, her smile icing over. You're on your own. Chu Wanning sighed and reached down for a pendant hanging from his belt. It was a gift from Taishan Jun, made of the finest jade, smooth and warm to the touch. He handed it to the madam and repeated, I'm looking for someone. The madam peered down at the pendant, her eyes reflected in the luminous jade. She coughed softly and tucked the little trinket away. Flashing an even more radiant smile, she asked sweetly, Now who is the Gongja looking for? A young man, about 15 or 16, said Chu Wanning, surnamed Mo. They climbed the stairs to the third floor, which was decorated with elegant carvings, and stopped in front of a sign that said Feirong Boudoir. Chu Wanning's feet sank into the luxurious carpet. Small wonder so many were willing to drown themselves in drunken pleasure here. They could exchange their coin for a fantasy as clustered with beauties as a field filled with poppies. How many heroes had rotted away in such a place? With its tender glow to chase away the endless dark of night, precious few would be willing to face life's devastating realities. This is the room. The madam flipped over a wooden placard on the door carved with the name Rongju, her cardamom-dyed nails a pinkish blur. She looked up, giving Chu Wanning a thoughtful once-over. Gongja, please wait a moment. I'll fetch Juer out so you can go in and speak with your friend. Chu Wanning blinked, then closed his eyes. Even a brothel madam could tell how he cared for Mo-Run. Thank you for your trouble. She entered the room. Chu Wanning heard some indistinct snatches of conversation. Some moments later, she stepped out again, a young male prostitute behind her. Chu Wanning glanced at him. Rongju's face was still faintly flushed from wine. As he turned aside, Chu Wanning found he looked very familiar, though he couldn't quite place the resemblance. See, that's a 4-alarm fire in Meat Bun land. Unless there's an immediate and knowable reason as to who Rongju is reminding Chu Wanning of right now, I'm terrified. Like, did he? Maria says Rongju looked like Shimei. No, did he? He's supposed to look like Shui Meng. Yes, that's true. That's most likely what's being referenced here. But I'm excessively paranoid. So I would need Chu Wanning to make that specific realization. Maybe. In order for me to... Because there's an opportunity for hiding in a little bit of ambiguity. If we know that Rongju looks like Shimei, then him saying this, we go, right, because he looks like Shimei. Because we make that presumption. Not necessarily the reality that she could have just out there waiting. She's ruined me, is what I'm saying. I take every single freaking sentence and then try to rip it apart. She's done this. It's entirely her fault. It's one of the reasons why I hate her. The youth bowed deeply to Chu Wanning, then left with the madam. Chu Wanning pushed the door open. Inside was a garish vision of red and purple. The sight made Chu Wanning's scalp tingle. No incense had been lit, but the room smelled unmistakably of wine. Mo Run was sprawled on the bed on his side, cheek propped in one hand. His long fingers toyed with the red tassel of a clay wine jar. The bed was a sea of disheveled crimson. Chu Wanning preferred not to think how he'd gotten into that state. He swept like a frosty gust of wind into this sensual scene a world apart from him. Shizun's here. When Chu Wanning didn't answer, Mo Run asked, "You want to sit down and have a cup of wine? It's Pear Blossom White. Good wine. Bet you never tried it before." "You're drunk," said Chu Wanning. Mo Run giggled as he watched the man in white approach the bed. He really was drunk. His hand shot out and he boldly grabbed Chu Wanning's waist sash. "It's nice to be drunk. Nothing can faze me like this. Come on, the night is young. Let's have some fun." What? Without a word, Chu Wanning hauled Mo Run up from the bed, yanking him out of that scarlet sea of desires. The veins on his hands stood out from the strain. Even so, his bearing was solemn, as befitted a respected Zongsha. All that betrayed his anxiety was the minute trembling of his fingertips. He closed his eyes. "Mo Run," he whispered. The drunken youth grunted in acknowledgement and let slip another mindless giggle. "I'm already too late," Chu Wanning rasped. He pressed his forehead to Mo Run's. With a twitch of his fingers, a terrible pain bloomed in Chu Wanning's chest, and a holy weapon materialized. A black Guqin with an upswept tail. High tongue blossoms unfurled along the body made of sacred wood, and its 7 strings glowed softly in the dimness of the room. Jaw clenched, Chu Wanning channeled the holy weapon's bountiful spiritual energy into his own body. This kind of power wouldn't stand a chance against Taishanjun, but it was enough for him to cast many spells. Holding Mo Run's forehead tightly against his own. Excuse me? Holding Mo Run's forehead tightly against his own? He closed his eyes. Holding Mo Run's forehead tightly against his own. Excuse me? That's a forehead touch moment? That's a moment of forehead touching? Just thought that bared special shout out. Little forehead touch moment. After just a moment, he felt it. The aura of the flower of eightfold sorrows within Mo Run. He could almost see it, a black blossom with many petals, its roots twining along Mo Run's arteries to drink from his heart. Here was the source of his endless hatred, the root of all the evil he'd done. We kind of knew this, or at least could guess that, at least I figured that it happened like after the initial flower was planted, but before it could like really take hold. But I am just now realizing in this moment that, of course, this means that Mo Run has been resisting the greater and more powerful demons in favor of, kindness and empathy and love and doing better than he did yesterday. Okay. Chu Wanning inhaled deeply. Following the instructions in the ancient text, he slowly mouthed an incantation. Then, with all the strength he could muster, he cried, "Fracture soul." His eyes flew open. A cold light flooded his vision. The flower of eightfold sorrows could only be suppressed using part of a spellcaster's soul. Just as the book described, he'd cleaved his earth soul in two. He transferred one half into Mo-Run, where their foreheads met. A gale rose within the room, and Juga emitted a cry like a phoenix's shriek as spiritual energy blazed to life. Mo-Run. This would be in his head. Mo-Run. Back then, it was your Shifu who didn't protect you properly. Now I'm here to save you. I'll set you free. The fragmented soul transformed into a wisp of white smoke that issued from Chu Waning's body. Mo-Run had lost consciousness, and Chu Waning was in agony. But he didn't let Mo-Run go for a moment, keeping their brows pressed together. I'll save you. When the last ray of light faded, both of them reeled backward. Chu Waning released his grip, and Mo-Run crumpled onto the bed. Juga disappeared, melding back into Chu Waning's body. After tearing away half of his earth soul, he could no longer control the holy weapon. He settled at the edge of the bed, letting his eyes drift shut. His face was deathly pale, his lips drained of their color. But relief flooded his chest. At last he'd taken the first step toward rewriting destiny. Using the power of his soul, he had arrested the flower's development. Mo-Run's heart would remain unchanged. He'd swum upstream through the river of time, and, finally, he had been able to protect him. Chu Waning couldn't tarry here. His first errand, to stop Mo-Run from being devoured by the flower, was complete. Now he needed to turn his attention to the second. So resisting the pull of the flower, with Chu Waning's help, mind, but he still had those moments of, I just want to devour him. I just want to consume him, right? He still had those moments that he's fought against. He didn't know how patient the villain behind the scenes would prove to be. They couldn't yet tear open a rift in space-time, but caution was always prudent. He needed to impart his memories to this world's version of himself. Should the worst come to pass, his self here should be equipped to mount a resistance. Thus, the second thing he needed to do was to find himself. The alarm sigils on the Red Lotus Pavilion were naturally useless against him. He got inside without a hitch. Standing before the open window, he looked at the white-robed man slumped over the desk inside, fallen asleep in the middle of painting the half-finished Holy Night Guardian before him. If only dealing with little ghosts and devils was still the worst of his worries. How nice that would be. Chu Waning transferred the remaining half of his earth soul to his sleeping other self. This soul was his to begin with, and the slumbering man's body readily accepted it. Chu Waning watched the silvery radiance curl through the air, wreathing his other self in a gentle glow until it gradually faded. A breeze rose, blowing some of the blueprints from the desk onto the floor. If another crisis arises, Mo-Run won't make you his enemy again, he said softly, leaning against the windowsill. My spiritual core is broken, and I've now split one of my souls in two. This is all I can do. I can no longer change my own world, but you can still change yours. Don't like her. Don't like her. Don't like her at all. Don't like her at all. You know? In fact, if you hate Meat Bun, like this stream. Hit the like button. Why not? I'm a YouTuber. Sure. If you hate Meat Bun, smash the like button. Show me how much you hate Meat Bun. Join me in the hatred of Meat Bun. The man in the room slumbered on. My my earth soul is the weakest among my 3 ethereal souls. I gave half of it to you, and the other half to Mo Run. If your lifetimes remain peaceful, these souls won't affect you. But in case the flower of eightfold sorrows takes root despite my efforts, or if the mortal realm is plunged into chaos, I'll leave a spell to fuse the 2 halves back together. If everything went as planned, the flower of eightfold sorrows would be fully uprooted from Mo Run's heart when those 2 soul fragments reunited. His other self would also receive the memories from his own timeline. What? Wait. That just happened. That just happened. So I'm flatlining. So yeah. So now the flower's gone from Mo Run. Now. Do you mean to tell me that she only gave us the download about this fuck-ass flower after it had been taken care of? She has spent, at this point, I believe, dozens of pages giving us the download about this flower and everything that happened to, you know, all of these horrifying revelations and details about what the fuck was done to Mo Run. And she does it, capping it off at the end there with, well, Chuaning, you know, put this little safety in place and the flower's handled now. It's fine. It's whatever. Sure. Yeah, that's fair. Don't resent me for passing this responsibility on to you, Chuaning continued. If it were possible, I'd rather you didn't have to know what I do. But he sighed quietly and said no more. At last, he set about his third and final errand here. He went to Huizui and entrusted him with a sensor he had been working on all this time, on which he'd cast a soul-fusing spell. The spell would take the memory that had left the deepest impression on him and use it to stitch the 2 halves of his soul back together. What that memory would be, Chuaning didn't know. There were too many possibilities, he thought. Perhaps it would be the great battle at the Heavenly Rift, or the experience of being turned into a blood hourglass when Mo Run took him prisoner, or that agonizing moment when Mo Run had first defiled him. Out of so many options, he couldn't guess. Sometimes, people didn't know their own hearts. I don't want to ask this question, but I have to, because I can't recall what the specific memory was, but it was something. I'm already mad about it, and I don't fully remember. What the hell was it? The deepest memory he had. What was that? Yeah. Someone remind me real quick. We've seen this. It was their first time. It was the wedding night sex that they had. Yeah. All right. Deepest impression, you say? And then Chuaning's time was up. No, excuse me. I was so fucked up. I skipped over a couple of sentences. He asked Huizui to seal the sensor in the cave on Dragonblood Mountain. He warned Huizui that, in the event of a great upheaval, he was to bring both Chuaning and Mo Run from this world to the cave. And then Chuaning's time was up. The fabric of space-time had the power to heal itself. Even deliberate tears like the one Chuaning had created would eventually knit back together. He wanted badly to remain, to stay in this pristine, peaceful world where all was still well. But he didn't belong here. He wouldn't defy the limitations of the first forbidden technique just to selfishly seek out a little warmth. So he left. He departed from this world that was like a lovely dream. He didn't look back. Chuaning stepped out of the rift into the backwoods in his own time. Just as he finished concealing the residual traces of spiritual energy, he spied a servant in red robes approaching. Chuzongsha, the newcomer respectfully said. It was the elderly eunuch Lu Gong, one of Mo Run's personal attendants. Zongsha, where have you been? His Majesty's been looking for you. Where is he? Asked Chuaning. In the Red Lotus Pavilion. Chuaning found Mo Run sitting beneath the wisteria vines with his eyes closed. As he heard Chuaning open the door, he slowly looked up and beckoned him over. Come here. Chuaning pressed his lips together, face impassive as ever. Was the music not to your liking? You dismissed the performers so early. It's got nothing to do with liking, said Mo Run. All the songs sound the same after a while, so tedious. He spread his sleeves wide and pulled Chuaning into his arms. He didn't bother asking where Chuaning had been. After all, Chuaning had always possessed an intractable personality. It would be stranger if he idled about in the Red Lotus Pavilion all day long. Mo Run made Chuaning sit in his lap, then kissed him on the cheek before burying his face in his neck. This venerable one had a dream just now. I dreamed you were holding my hand, teaching me how to write. That was rude. Was that necessary? Was that really necessary? Chuaning's heart skipped a beat, but Taishan-jin, lost in his own memories, didn't notice. He continued, speaking smoothly yet with a faint note of sorrow. Even he failed to discern. There was a character I couldn't quite get right, even after 5 tries. You were so mad, but you didn't give up on me, said Mo Run. You took my hand in your own. Some petals floated into the room through the window. I saw... He was so engrossed in recounting his dream, he'd forgotten to call himself this venerable one. That's true. It's true! No! Yeah! Yeah! Uh-huh! Yeah, sure. 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 Sure! Of course. Of course. She's gonna take this out for a spin. And it's not like, I don't want to give this to her, but it's not like she hasn't earned it. She's gone 7 volumes, and now she's finally at the moment where she gets to do shit like this. She's earned the right to do it. But I still fucking hate her. And I've already said that it definitely would have been this volume, if not for the very end of volume 7, that made me hate her. So... this is really just emphasizing that point. Mo Run paused, suddenly wistful and young again. I saw in the paper. I hope you may greet these words with a smile, for writing is akin to reuniting. His face split into a grin, equal parts joyful and menacing. I can only ever see these things in my dreams. He raised his head, meeting Chu Waning's troubled gaze. When he next spoke, his voice contained Taishan-jun's usual coldness once more. Do you know why this venerable one wanted to see you? Mo-run reached up, touching Chu Waning's cool cheek. You look so beautiful in that dream, he said placidly. So beautiful this venerable one couldn't forget it. This venerable one wanted to come and take a good look at the real you. Chu Waning lowered his lashes. I'm not afraid of hating you. I'm afraid of not hating you. Either way, it would have fucking sucked. But I love that my brain turned it into that instead of what's actually on the page, which is, I'm afraid of not hating you. I need to hate you, said Mo-run. Otherwise, His throat went dry. Otherwise what? Otherwise, I'd never be able to forgive myself. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to carry on. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to keep dragging out this sorry existence. I have to hate you. I haven't changed my mind, and I've never been wrong to hate you. Wanang. At length, he sighed and closed his eyes. At the end, you and I are the only ones left. Chu Wanning felt like a knife was pushing through his heart. Girl, same. Chu Wanning being a mood. He was about to speak when he felt the ground give out beneath him. He was tumbling through empty air. He startled, awake. I was actually physically ill there for a second. We're awake now. Not even the end of the chapter. Not even a scene break. But he's awake now. His eyes flew open, but everything was dark. He could hear his racing heartbeat and feel cold sweat soaking his back. Emperor Taishan-jun's leering face seemed to hang before him. He shook all over, gasping for breath. The memories of his other lifetime washed over him, and he trembled with uncontrollable dread as those images of the past surged in wave after frantic wave. Chu Wanning swallowed thickly. Where was he? Where was he? Why couldn't he see anything? Why was there only darkness? His thoughts were a hopeless jumble. It was a long time before he remembered what had happened at Dragonblood Mountain. Mo-run, he mumbled absently, trying to gather his fragmented consciousness. Without warning, a cool hand, smooth as silk, touched his cheek. The hand took hold of his jaw to turn his face, and a thumb ghosted over his lips. A voice, obviously warped by a voice-changing spell, laughed softly. Finally, you're awake. I've been waiting for ages. Voice-changing spell. Voice-changing spell. Voice-changing spell. The spell that changes voices. Not to be Cusco's poison about this, but Shimei has changed his voice so that, Hua Binan has changed his voice so that Chu Wanning knows that the voice that is speaking to him has been fucked with, but obviously wouldn't know who's actually talking to him. That was the end of the chapter. We're on page 111. for chapter 253, which is called Bastard. And actually, since we're coming up on the break, we may as well just go ahead and take the break now, because we're about to get into this fucking madness. So I'm gonna need to reheat my tea in order to deal with it. So we're gonna take the break now. I'll be back in just a few minutes for chapter 253, which is called Bastard. And I don't know if I didn't have things to do during the break that I usually do, I would, I don't know, stare at a wall, but maybe you could do something more productive than that. Go grab a snack or something. Maybe something soft and nice to like curl up in, you know? Something. Go do something nice for yourself. And I'll be right back. Okay? Okay. Hello, and welcome back to the stream. We are continuing on with Volume 8 of Erha. Chapter 253 on page 111. And this chapter is called Bastard. I feel like I'll be saying that a lot. We're prepared for Hua Binan and Chuaning to speak to each other while they're both conscious. We're prepared for this? We're prepared for this. This is fine. It'll be fine. That unsettlingly distorted voice broke the stillness of the room. Had Chuaning been able to see, he would have discovered Shimei sitting at his bedside, gazing at him cheerfully, as if he was a spider, and Chuaning a creature that had haplessly stumbled into his web. "How are you feeling? Did you sleep well?" Chuaning didn't immediately answer. He shifted slightly and found that his spiritual energy was still woefully depleted. His wrists were bound with an immortal binding rope and his eyes by a black silk ribbon. Panic would be futile at this juncture. Chuaning had always been dauntless. He had a clear idea of his goals, and he knew how to meet any challenge with a steady heart. Across 2 lifetimes, only one man had ever put him off balance. No one else could so much as ruffle his composure. Chuaning silently combed through his disjointed memories and impressions from before he'd lost consciousness. He'd heard fragmented conversations and movements around him while he'd been drifting in and out of awareness. He now endeavored to piece together this information. As he thought, the door to the hidden chamber rumbled open. Nangong Lu had returned with a basket full of fresh fruit. Gee, I wonder which fruit it is. "Dear friend Gaga, here are the tangerines," he said. "I picked the ones with little circles on the bottom. They're the sweetest." He paused as he caught sight of Chuaning on the bed. "Huh? The favorite consort Gaga is awake." Hearing such an epithet directed toward himself, Chuaning's bloodless face instantly grew stormy. Favorite consort, as in consort Chu. So then this dear friend Gaga could only be... I have a sinking suspicion, but I'll hold on to it for the moment. Shimei took the tangerines from Nangong Lu and patted him on the head with a smile. "Good job. I have to talk to Consort Chu about a few things. Go outside and play by yourself, okay?" "Can't I stay? I can peel the tangerines for you." "No, you shouldn't stay," Shimei replied. "Some things aren't fit for children's ears." Nangong Lu grumbled dopily and left the way he'd come. The room was now quiet, filled only with the sounds of their breathing and the occasional sputter of the candles. Shimei selected a tangerine, peeled it with practiced movements, and removed the stringy pith. As he worked, he spoke to Chuaning in a tone one might use to chat about the weather. "Could you tell who that was, the person who just left?" Met with silence, Shimei prompted, "I'm sure you recognized his voice." He brought the freshly peeled tangerine to Chuaning's lips. "Try this. It's a tangerine from Mount Jiao. Shu Shuanglin planted it himself, and he knew what he was doing. It should be very sweet." Chuaning turned his face away. "Look at you," Shimei said slowly. "In a temper the moment you wake up." After sitting silent a minute, Chuaning said coldly, "Where is he?" "Who?" "You know who I'm talking about." Shimei arched a brow. "You mean Moran?" When Chuaning didn't reply, Shimei laughed softly. "Looks like you really do care for him. See how his whereabouts are the first thing on your mind. You haven't even asked who I am. Surely someone who humiliated you all those years isn't worth your concern?" The blindfolded man pressed his lips into a thin line, his strain showing in the set of his jaw. As Shimei stared, a maddening heat flared to life in his chest, but he still feigned calm, as if nothing fazed him. A proper meal should be eaten with elegance. It wouldn't do to bare one's fangs or leave bloody drippings. Taisha and Jun's style of wolfing everything down, bones and all, was too rash. His bowl was empty before he could appreciate the flavor. Xu Mingjing felt nothing but disdain for that reincarnated starving mongrel. Though a burning heat was pooling in his own belly, he would still take the time to gently massage the meat, to baste the delectable dish before him in aromatic juices. He would braise this delicacy until it was meltingly tender before savoring every last bite. I'm actually going to be physically ill. I've never been this close to being actually physically ill. I don't think ever. Because he has a different voice, so he could pretend to be someone else while he... That's what I was thinking earlier. Oh, Liv is correct in her comment that I won't say where it's from, just in case spoilers are a thing. And there's someone who hasn't read that. But yes, Liv's correct. Let me ask you another question. You won't eat a tangerine that's held right up to your lips? Chimay chuckled. With this obstinate personality of yours, how did you ever manage to keep Emperor Taishanjun happy? Take it away. I still think it best if you eat it. You haven't drunk any water in days. Your lips are starting to crack. Where is Morun? Chu Wanning said between gritted teeth. Chimay fixed his gaze on Chu Wanning, his smile slowly fading. Whether in this lifetime or the last, whether you have your memories or not, Morun's the only person you ever think about. Before he could finish saying Shizun, Chimay realized his mistake and promptly shut his mouth. But Chu Wanning caught the tiny wobble in his act. Chimay narrowed his eyes. Tell me, what's so great about Morun? He demanded, watching the last bit of color fade from Chu Wanning's compressed lips. He's impulsive, dense, laughably naive, and morally questionable. What is there to like about him? He waited. When no answer was forthcoming, he asked derisively, his face, his spiritual power, his charm. His voice was a low growl by the end, those long-suppressed carnal desires rearing their head. When he saw Chu Wanning biting his bottom lip as he controlled his emotions, Chimay felt his mouth grow dry. His questioning veered in a more obscene direction. Or is it because he's good in bed? Chu Wanning's pallid face colored with fury. Shut up. Of course Chimay didn't listen to him. He'd gone to no end of trouble to get his hands on this man. He wasn't going to stop before he'd had his fun. Grinning, he asked, Perhaps Consort Chu doesn't know that Morun left the posthumous title of esteemed consort on your grave in the past life. Chimay trained his gaze on Chu Wanning's face, taking in every minute change in his expression. His eyes curved into generous crescents. It sounds silly to call a bed warmer esteemed, but I guess it's fitting. In both lifetimes, no one sullied your honor but him, but that also means you have no one to compare him to. Chimay mused. Of course you'd think he's the best if you've never tried anyone else. A slow fingertip traced Chu Wanning's features, sliding from his nose to his lips, his jaw, the jut of his throat. Chu Wanning vibrated with anger, tendons bulging from his wrists as he strained against the immortal binding ropes, but his efforts were futile. Don't waste your energy, Chimay advised. If Consort Chu wants to be unbound, if you want to know where Morun is, I can grant your wishes. But, as my war prize, won't you at least play a little game with me first? A tense pause. What do you want? Chimay laughed. I just want to take a little bit of your heart from the person you gave it to. I want you to stop thinking about him and think fondly of me instead. How about that? You're the one who planted that goo flower. Why would I think fondly of you? It was impossible for Chu Wanning to completely hide the despair and pain in his voice. Despite a mighty effort to quell his emotions, they were still on the verge of flooding out. Indeed I am, Chimay chuckled softly. But, Consort Chu, do you know who I really am? Why don't you take a guess? If there's something you want to say, get to the point. Oh, you're as ferocious as ever, Chimay sighed. All right, then. Consort Chu once said that small bets beget cheer and large bets beget ruin. You might as well go for ruin if you're going to bet at all. So why don't we have a little wager between us? After a beat of silence, Chimay added, If you don't mind, let me first see how many articles of clothing you're wearing. Chu Wanning didn't make a sound, but his jaw spasmed unconsciously. Chimay's spirits rose yet again. He counted 5 separate articles of clothing on Chu Wanning, including his robes and belt sash. I'll give you 5 chances. If you guess right, I'll tell you where Moran is. Chimay paused thoughtfully. But for every time you guess wrong, I'll take off a piece of clothing. If all your clothes are gone, but Consort Chu still hasn't guessed correctly, then... You're making him play strip detective? Rather than finish the thought, Chimay's pale pink tongue flicked out to moisten his lips. He returned to his seat, waiting for Chu Wanning to make his first guess. If Chu Wanning refused to speak, that too was fine. Chimay was in no rush. If there was one thing he had plenty of now, it was time. How is Chimay not the first guess after the Shizun slip? Granted, all he heard was the sh part. And technically, with where it came in when he was speaking, it was like right at the beginning of a sentence. And I feel like if it came right at the end of a sentence, it would have had the more immediate feel of that was a address, that was a title, that was being spoken. Listen, I don't know. I'm clinging to hope that it was obvious enough. Because he could just guess it in one time and then we can be on our way. Yet as minute after minute slipped by without a peep from Chu Wanning, Chimay's brows inched higher. He had plenty of time, it was true, but not necessarily the patience to go with it. Come, take a guess, he urged. Chu Wanning replied at last, Fuck off. Chimay's lip curled. Don't forget, you're at my mercy right now. Don't push me. A pause. Chu Wanning, you have nothing with which to bargain with me. Emperor Taishanjun isn't right in the head. He might have let you have your way when he couldn't figure out how to win the argument, but I'm not like him. He coldly continued. When you're in my hands, you'll need to be a little more obedient. He waited a while longer, but Chu Wanning said nothing. Don't make me resort to force, Chimay warned, voice hardening. Keeping silent won't make things any easier for you. He reached for Chu Wanning's sash with one long, slender hand, his fingers trailing along the fabric like a knife slicing through the tender meat of a fish. Listen now. I'm going to count to 3. If you still refuse to speak, the consequences will be yours to bear. Chimay's eyes gleamed faintly. He wasn't sure if he wanted Chu Wanning to guess correctly or not. Either way, it didn't really matter. They were long past the point of no return. He wondered how he should reveal his true identity. Whatever method he chose, it had to be both sufficiently thrilling and visceral. He had traded moves with the man before him over 2 lifetimes. Now that he'd come away victorious, he deserved to savor his triumph. 1. The world seemed to shimmer with excitement in Chimay's eyes. 2. How would Chu Wanning feel? Angry, sad, scared? He waited, lips parted in expectation. 3. I see Consort Chu tends to take his esteemed chastity to the grave. No wonder Taishanjun was so addicted to you, said Shimei, only half joking. Since you refuse to guess, we'll move on to harsher methods. You... Hua Binan. Chu Waning's voice was cold as ice. Now do we know that Hua Binan is Shimei? I wouldn't put it past him. Either way, this fucking boss ass bitch. Whew. Shimei's hand stilled on its way to pulling open Chu Waning's sash. He let out a small laugh. You got half of it. Go on. A fox-like smirk appeared on his face. Such cunning would be disagreeable on most people, but Shimei's elegance was such that he still resembled a pure lotus blooming over the water. He was certain Chu Waning wouldn't be able to tease out that innermost kernel of truth. Self-satisfaction surged in his chest. Self-satisfaction surged in his chest. I wish you truly died. In the poll, which was about how long it was going to take Chu Waning to clock the water bitch, who had a few pages? I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even have a guess. I really didn't. Whoever fucking had a few pages, you win today's stream. It wasn't even like 23% of the vote had a few pages. You win. You fucking win. Oh, that's so satisfying. Shimei's smile froze. It was several breaths before he managed to ask, "What did you say?" The man on the bed spoke without the slightest hint of warmth. In the past lifetime, during that heavenly rift in the snowstorm, I wish you had truly died. Shimei gaped at him. Words of jubilation had been on the tip of his tongue, but now he found himself speechless. His hand remained suspended above Chu Waning. He didn't know where to put it, or what to do. Ximing Jing. Chu Waning's sigh was soft, but it left Shimei suddenly numb, as if stung by a wasp. It's you, isn't it? It was phrased like a question, but Chu Waning's voice was sure. Shimei let his lashes fall, hiding his eyes. Finally, he chuckled. That's right. I didn't die. Sorry to disappoint you. He wouldn't admit he'd lost, but the elation had faded from his voice. I'm the Ximing Jing who came here from the past lifetime, said Shimei. From your other life, from Taishanjun's world. Don't get me mixed up with that kid who's been tagging at your heels in this lifetime. He hesitated. I'll untie you like I said I would. He unknotted the immortal binding rope and tugged the ribbon from Chu Waning's face. Peach Blossom eyes met Phoenix ones, both pairs as calm and unfathomable as an ancient well. Greetings, Shizun. Chu Waning had expected this. He felt deeply grim, but not surprised. So you do remember I'm your Shizun, he remarked, fixing his eyes on Shimei. Shimei smiled even more sweetly. Only now did Chu Wanning see how finely honed the dagger lurking beneath that sweetness was. Of course I remember, answered Shimei. You once held an umbrella over me. I've never forgotten. I'm waiting to go back into the Shimei voice until he says that he takes off the freaking voice thing. But now I'm currently savoring a nice shot of vindication whenever that umbrella moment happened. And I was like, is he fucking in love with Chuaning? Because I was right. And I'm not going to let anyone live it down. As utterly spent as Chuaning was, even this couldn't negate the innate stubbornness in his features. He glared at Shimei, then said, clipped and cold, You bastard. You flatter me, Shimei said with a laugh. Shizun, when did you guess it was me? Was it in the past life? Chu Wanning merely pinned him with that icy gaze. His eyes contained fury, to be sure, but most prominent was disappointment. No, it can't have been, Shimei mused. If you'd known I was Hua Binan, then you would have told Huazui when you opened the space-time gate. His long lashes flicked up. It was in this lifetime. Maybe not long ago. He paused. You heard some of the conversation between me and Mo Run at Dragonblood Mountain. Faced once again with Chu Wanning's silence, Shimei smiled. Forget it. It doesn't matter. You're in my hands now, and you'll never escape. Chu Wanning's gaze seemed to shudder. Of his 3 disciples, Shimei had always been most mysterious to him. He'd accepted him as a student because he was gentle and respectful. He could empathize with the pain and worries of others, and he treated everyone kindly. Chu Wanning admired all these qualities, even more so because they were qualities he himself did not possess. Thus he had agreed to be Shimei's teacher. But more than once, he'd felt that something wasn't right. For instance, Shui Jingyong told him Shimei was an orphan he'd rescued from a war-torn area, yet little inconsistencies would often crop up when Shimei talked about his life before Xisheng Peak. It was exactly what one would expect from someone who'd made up a story and then forgotten the details. And sometimes Shimei's behavior would inexplicably change for an instant, like a well-trained beast who'd looked docile, but couldn't stop his eyes from flashing at the scent of blood. First of all, fuck you in that analogy, meat bun. Second of all, I'm sure little moments like that are sprinkled throughout. Hell, I leapt on them like a frickin' bloodhound. But after watching him closely all these years, Chu Wanning had never seen Shimei act disgracefully. He'd eventually concluded he was seeing things, that the flower before him was so splendid he'd mistakenly taken its dazzling colors for warning signs. Chu Wanning was like a hedgehog. His whole body was covered in sharp quills, save for his soft underside. But he took in his disciples, took in all the people who showed him kindness, and tucked them under his velvety belly. He doubted whether he should trust Shimei. He'd had his reservations and tested the waters, but he'd still chosen to put his faith in him in the end. The knife plunged into the hedgehog's soft stomach from beneath, blood streaming over the ground. 2 absolutely fucked up analogies in a row. How much of the past life do you remember now? Shimei asked. Of course, he was answered yet again by silence. Shimei continued his interrogation. You were getting along perfectly well staying out of it. Why'd you put yourself through all that suffering to stop me? He had manifold grievances from the past lifetime. Now that Shimei finally had a chance to get answers, he couldn't pass up the opportunity. You spared Emperor Taisheng-jun's life. You even helped him transmigrate and be reborn. Why? At this last question, Chu Wanning at last looked up. He's not like you. Shimei hesitated. How so? Perhaps I'm ruthless, but aren't his hands covered in blood? Chu Wanning stared at Shimei. You know what you planted in his heart. So what? I might have planted the flower, but he's the one who killed all those people, Shimei retorted. You saw it with your own eyes in the past life. He laid waste to the land. Shui Jingyang, Wang Chuqing, Jingshe, Yuangshi. Who slaughtered them all in cold blood? I mean, there's kind of a gigantic fucking asterisk next to all of that. Shimei lifted a languid hand, peering at his slender fingers and his neat rounded nails. Those hands were clean and refined, unmarred by a single speck of dust. He slanted Chu Wanning a glance and laughed. Surely, it wasn't me. Red-hot fury blazed up in his chest, rendering Chu Wanning temporarily speechless. Once again, Chu Wanning is a mood. I never wished to massacre Rufeng Sect or kill Shui Jingyang. No one would come to me to avenge them. Shimei continued. What have I done? I merely gave him a goo flower. I've never killed anyone as long as I've lived. This was exactly the type of bullshit that had me worried about certain events happening. Because Shimei has it all built up very, very delicately, one could say, intricately, about his own purity. If he hasn't actually taken a life with his bare hands under his own free will, then he's never hurt anyone. Sure. Okay. Shimei cheerfully concluded. The knife was in his hands, and he drove it into their chests. It really has very little to do with me. The flower of eightfold sorrows doesn't create new grudges. The curse can only amplify what was already there. All those desires were his own. It would be too unfair to blame me for his crimes. I'm going to puke. Every word Shimei spoke heightened Chu Wanning's disgust. Fucking mood. At the word unfair, Chu Wanning's eyes flashed, glacially cold. What do you find unfair about it? Those were all his actions. Why should Shizun blame me? Don't you know what kind of person he really is? Of course I do, replied Shimei. I'm afraid Shizun's the one who's confused. A thread of tangerine pith was stuck between two of Shimei's fingers. He produced a white silk handkerchief and gingerly wiped it away, then intoned, Why did Mo Run raise Rufeng Sect to the ground? Because his heart held hatred. Why did Mo Run kill Shui Jingyang? Because his heart held fear. Why did Mo Run defile you? Because his heart held lust. His gaze flicked over to Chu Wanning. If someone stabbed him once, he could never forgive them. If someone gave him an inch, he'd take a mile. If a beauty stepped toward him, he'd have to have a taste. That's the kind of person he is. Shiming Jing, said Chu Wanning through gritted teeth. You erased all the kindness from his heart and amplified his grudges and impulses by 1,000, 10,000 times. Can you really say, with a straight face, that he wished to do all those things? Who wouldn't wish to destroy the world if they were consumed by hatred? You. Whose fault is it that he held grudges? That he had greed carved into his bones? That he had those impulses in the first place? Shimei laughed. If his heart... Oh, this makes sense. This makes a fucking frustrating amount of sense. What he's about to say. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's perfect. It's perfect. And I fucking hate this woman. If his heart were pure, with no ill intentions, the flower of eightfold sorrows would have had no effect. What happened was because his heart was filthy. He's simply a vulgar man. That makes so much sense. I feel silly that I hadn't clocked it. Of course. Of course. Of course. Shimei would never have been affected by the flower. Shimei's pure. The real black and white thinking comes to the forefront. And it doesn't belong to Mo Run. Not naturally. The expression on Chu Wanning's face grew deeply ugly. Just as he drew breath to respond, Shimei added, "People are responsible for their own desires. That's an undeniable fact." Chu Wanning had been ready to argue with him, but at this, he suddenly felt that there was nothing more to say. He turned away. I can't get fucking over Chu Wanning's face grew deeply ugly. That has to be the first time in this entire series that Chu Wanning has ever been described as anything less than, beautiful Chu Wanning. Shimei shook his head. "Shizun, you're always on his side. You think there's a reason, an explanation behind everything he does. Only because there is! You know what? Tell me then, whose explanations should I believe?" Chu Wanning asked icily. "Yours?" Shimei was quiet for a turn, then chuckled. "So Shizun still likes him?" Chu Wanning's eyes were like a frozen lake reflecting the cold moon. "I've been trading blows with Shizun across 2 lifetimes. I still can't compare to him, even when I've won." "What is there to compare between the two of you?" Chu Wanning replied coolly. Shimei narrowed his eyes. "Is that really what you think of me? Is there nothing else you wish to say?" Chu Wanning didn't reply right away. He seemed to ponder the question in earnest. Then he lifted his lashes. "There is," he answered evenly. Shimei broke into a smile. "What's that?" "There's no need for you to compare yourself to Mo Run," Chu Wanning said expressionlessly. "You aren't even worthy of comparison to Shu Shuanglin. He at least had real passion, and wasn't afraid to act on it. He wasn't like you, Hua Binan. He didn't even bother calling him Xu Mingjing anymore. You're just a bastard." Hua Binan found dead for real this time. That's the end of the chapter. I'm unbelievably overwhelmed at this moment. We're on page 123 for chapter 254, which is called Missing You. Shimei fell silent, his fair cheek twitching as if he'd been slapped. I mean, it wasn't even really a slap, honestly. He just, Chu Wanning just beat the shit out of him. It wasn't even really... A slap is a little bit of an understatement. At last, he pursed his lips, then said, "You're determined not to leave me the slightest bit of dignity. Oh, honey. The thing about you is that you have delusions of dignity, but no actual dignity to speak of." He reached for Chu Wanning's jaw again, but this time Chu Wanning flinched away like he'd felt the touch of a snake. Shimei's eyes narrowed. His face clouded over, yet a second later he'd rearranged his features into a mask of serenity. Enough, he said, his countenance gentle as ever. You've always been hard-headed. In the past life you intended to kill him, did you not? But in the end you couldn't bear to. Just before you died, you even transferred your broken souls into his heart. Ah. That's another piece of the puzzle. He was correct. During that terrible final battle in snowy Kunlun, when Chu Wanning had touched Mo Run's forehead for the last time, he channeled the fractured remnants of his souls into Mo Run's body. By the end of his previous lifetime, his souls had been splintered and separated from each other. He had left one fragment in the body of the teenaged Mo Run and given another to his slumbering other self. He'd taken everything that remained, along with his final precarious hopes, and bequeathed it all to Emperor Taishanjun. Chu Wanning hadn't known what effect this might have on the flower of eightfold sorrows in its third stage of development. But he knew the Gu flower received its first nourishment from the soul of its spellcaster. If he channeled his own souls into it, perhaps something would change. At that point, he was no more than an empty, battered shell. He'd exhausted his strength doing all that he could, all that he had to do. He had always been iron-willed and decisive. Mo Run was his first and only weakness. Because he'd held tight to a thread of hope that Mo Run could be saved, he hadn't killed him. He didn't mind offering up his shattered souls, whether or not it would be of any use. He just wanted to bring the old Mo Run back to the world of the living. Shimei laughed, as if he understood everything Chu Wanning hadn't said. I'm going to go ahead and assume that he no longer has the voice distortion on. So this should be fun operating between Huabinan and Chu Wanning. Your last-ditch effort couldn't pull the Gu flower out of Mo Run's chest. But you did succeed in influencing his emotions. He found himself caught between good and evil, ultimately succumbing to madness and dying by his own hand. Chu Wanning's expression flickered as he looked up in silence. After crossing paths on Mount Jiao with that Taishanjun without a heartbeat, he had guessed Mo Run had met such an end. But he still felt a dull ache in his heart upon hearing Shimei say so bluntly that he'd taken his own life. Watching him closely, Shimei continued, Shizin, you did it. You protected him. I don't know how, but his soul's transmigrated to the past. He sighed. I still don't understand even now. You were an invalid then. How did you manage to dash my plans? Ah, you. You always manage to surprise me. He lowered his dark lashes, downy as cattail fluff, and drew closer, as if to kiss Chu Wanning's lips. Chu Wanning jerked back to reality. Lightning fast, he grabbed Shimei by the throat, veins bulging on the back of his hands. Shimei's expression didn't waver. He calmly reached up to grip Chu Wanning's wrists, as though he'd anticipated such a reaction. Really, Shizin, he chuckled. Ruining me once isn't good enough for you. Unfortunately, you're too late. With a soft hiss, a golden black banded crate slithered out of Shimei's wide sleeves and clamped its jaws around Chu Wanning's arm. Who knew what kind of magical tempering the snake had undergone, but the single bite was unbelievably agonizing. Chu Wanning's hands immediately went limp and panicking. Maneuvering him easily by the wrists, Shimei bound him against the bedpost in an even more humiliating position than before. Don't worry. The snake isn't venomous. Shimei tied Chu Wanning's hands together, then sat up and stroked the banded snake with snow-white fingertips. He narrowed his peach blossom eyes. I raised this snake just for you. Its bite will sap you of strength. Out of respect for Shizin, I'll leave it at this. Chimay raised his hand, and the snake slithered back into his sleeve. Speaking of the past life, in truth, I never wanted to leave you with Moe you for so long. Chimay stood up. With unhurried movements, he removed his cloak, then his outer robe, then all the color drained from Chu Wanning's face. Shiming Jing, he thundered, revolted. Chimay flashed an agreeable smile and paced closer. Shizin, I'll tell you a secret. When you two were married in the past life, I came to the wedding banquet as Hua Binan. Chu Wanning's eyes flew wide in shock. Emperor Taishunjun draped you in red silks, selfishly preventing the guests from seeing your face. They only knew he'd married a consort Chu, but I knew it was you. When the banquet ended, I didn't leave. I slipped into the Red Lotus Pavilion, and then he walked in. There's art. We'll get to it in a fucking second. Chimay's eyes glittered. He was under the control of my flower, but his thoughts and emotions were still his own. I hid. I couldn't let him detect me. But I didn't leave. Overwhelming fury and disgust sent tremors through Chu Wanning as he looked back at him. Chimay took a seat on the bed, laying cool hands on Chu Wanning's chest. Did you know? His voice had become slightly hoarse, his eyes glimmering hungrily. His fingers trailed downward and paused at Chu Wanning's waist. He began to untie Chu Wanning's sash. The sight of you that night, mad with lust from the aphrodisiac, as he fucked you till you screamed. The rims of Chimay's eyes were reddening with desire. It's fueled my fantasies for 2 lifetimes. I'm a puke. The art is, somewhat ironically, actually a relief from this moment, because the art is of Chu Wanning choking Hua Binan. And not in a good way, right? So we're just going to take this respite for a couple seconds. This humiliation was almost too much to bear, but Chu Wanning was exhausted from receiving the memories from his other lifetime, and the snake bite had left him without any strength in his limbs. Shiming Jing, he gritted out, get the fuck out of here. Chimay let out a tinkling laugh. It's just sex. No need to be so touchy. Besides, haven't you already let one of your disciples fuck you? Enough with the sanctimonious act. Get out. What's the difference between getting on your knees to satisfy one disciple versus 2? Chimay asked blithely. I don't mind. So why don't you just lie back and enjoy it? You never know, my skills might be better than his. Get the fuck. Before Chu Wanning could finish, he heard a frigid voice from the door. Get the fuck out. Chu Wanning jolted as if struck by lightning, whipping his head around. Without his notice, someone had opened the stone door from outside. At its threshold stood a man with his face in shadow, holding a long black and gold blade to his chest. He loomed impossibly with the door ajar behind him, a stern and upright silhouette lit from behind. Chimay's brows knit together. It's you. Back already? The man strode into the room, frigid air gusting in his wake. The candles swayed and flickered. Their light seemed somehow cold as it landed on his slim-fitting combat robes and leather armor, illuminating him fully at last. His long legs were wrapped tightly in a pair of black military boots, and he wore a belt with a silver dragon's head buckle around his slender waist, with a weapon compartment of pure silver hanging from it. His thorned vambraces flashed above a pair of black dragonskin gloves. Above it all was a handsome chiseled face, his features impossibly gallant. Emperor Taishun. Not the Mo run we wanted to be seeing right now. But at the very least, any Mo run will, not let anyone either make love to or defile Chuaning. So we have that going for us, anyway. He emanated a terrifying cold, and the coppery scent of blood lingered on him as if he'd just come from the battlefield. When he looked up, his pale cheek was still marred with a few flecks of blood. His dagger-like gaze honed in on the two men upon the bed. His eyes skimmed over Chuaning, then bored into Shiming Jing, glinting like shards of ice. Fuck off. A chill settled over Shimei's features at the sight of him. He slowly sat upright. Did you kill all those people at Gaywatch, like I told you? It wasn't enough to satisfy this venerable one's appetites. As he crossed the room, he tore off his gloves with flashing white teeth, revealing fine-boned hands beneath. He tossed the bloody dragon skin onto the table, then fixed Shimei with a glare. Watch yourself. This venerable one won't hesitate to make you another vengeful ghost who's died by my hand. Shimei's expression was unsightly. Don't forget to whom you're speaking. This venerable one only cares whether or not I'm having a good time, Taishun shot back coldly. You're in the wrong bed. Out. Since when do you have the right to use that tone with me? This venerable one has always had it, Taishun said, voice laced with threat. Shimei seemed on the verge of losing his temper. I am your master, he cried, eyes flashing. So what? Mount Jiao is this venerable one's territory, and on that bed is this venerable one's property. Taishun loomed over Shiming Jing, the corner of his mouth quirking with mockery. Master. Kindly fuck off. Taishun and Shiming Jing continued to fling insults back and forth, neither giving an inch. Chuaning watched from the sidelines in silence, rather lost. Shiming Jing had said Taishun was dead, so what was this man before him? A pawn? A puppet? Plus, the goo flower he'd neutralized had resided in the body of the present timeline's Mo Run. Emperor Taishun's flower had been rooted too deeply. His heart could never recover. As such, he should have been hopelessly in love with Shimei, but judging from his tone, he didn't give a rat's ass about him. And why did he call him his master? Shimei glared at Taishun, then scoffed and rose to his feet, draping a robe over his shoulders. Naturally, he was well acquainted with the answers to these questions that stumped Chuaning. Mo Run's suicide in the past lifetime had cost Shimei his most formidable weapon. He'd used medicine to revive Mo Run's physical body and rouse the cognizant soul that remained within it, turning the dead man into a revenant. The result was similar to a Zhenlong pawn. Taishun would obey Shimei's orders while retaining his original consciousness. There were, however, several outcomes that Shimei had not foreseen. Perhaps he had made a mistake somewhere, or perhaps Mo Run had suffered too much trauma while alive, or perhaps the unnatural modifications to Mo Run's body, first in life, then in death, had caused some irreversible damage. At any rate, the revenant Taishun's memories of Shimei were hopelessly confused. He'd think Shimei was alive in one moment and dead in the next. Sometimes he'd forget who Shimei was entirely. Even though Taishun was presently staring Huabinan in the face, he didn't recognize this person before him as the man whose memory he'd long cherished. He only saw him as his master, whose orders he often ignored. You're impossible to deal with. Shimei walked up to Taishun and prodded him in the forehead. Scatter soul, he commanded. Taishun stiffened. His sharp gaze went slack, his pupils losing focus. You're a puppet I made, but you're getting more and more defiant. Always talking back to me and trying to undermine me. Shimei patted Taishun's ice-cold cheek. It's fine. I don't blame you. You're a mere scrap of a person, after all. Taishun stared straight ahead in uncomprehending silence. Try to bear with it a little longer. Shumei advised. Once I get my hands on the item we talked about, I'll refine it for you. Then you'll behave. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? Yet just as he said this, his control over Taishan Jun again began to fray. Shumei's face turned somber as he saw how quickly Taishan Jun was recovering. In no time at all, Taishan Jun's eyes were once more bright and focused. If anything, they were even colder and more determined than before. Taishan Jun turned that oppressively cold gaze on Shumei. He squinted slightly and wrinkled his nose, like a panther peering at its meal. Why haven't you fucked off yet? His slender fingers closed around Bugui's hilt. Do you want to become one of this venerable one's sword practice dummies? Shumei didn't bother answering. Taishan Jun was too pig-headed. Even as his so-called master, Shi Mingjing knew the rope around his neck would have no effect no matter how hard he yanked it. If this Lord of Darkness truly gave his wildest impulses their heads, the outcome would be frightful. In the end, Shumei had little choice but to leave. As the door closed behind him, Taishan Jun stared at Chu Wanning on the bed. His expression was subtly strange, as though he was trying with all his might to hold back, yet was overcome by a longing he couldn't suppress. He sat down and reached for Chu Wanning, grabbing him by the waist. I'm too beside myself. His voice faltered. He didn't know how to continue, so he pressed his lips together and changed tack. Chu Wanning looked back at him steadily, but even after more than a moment, Taishan Jun didn't finish that thought. He blinked several times, his eyes swimming with undisguised bitterness. Ahem. This venerable one has something important to tell you. Go on. Taishan Jun hesitated again, then backpedaled. Actually, it's not that important. No need to say it. Met with silence, Taishan Jun spoke up again in an even more decisive manner. It doesn't matter whether or not it's important. If you want to hear it so badly, this venerable one will tell you. This left Chu Wanning at a loss for words. Him once again being a mood. This venerable one wants to say... Taishan Jun took a deep breath and closed his eyes. This venerable one wants to say, he repeated stiffly, that after all these years, it's almost like this venerable one might have missed you somewhat. He added hastily. Not very much, though. Just a little bit. That handsome, bone-white face instantly clouded over with regret at having voiced such a sentiment. Chu Wanning stared at him blankly, the souls and memories from 2 lifetimes bleeding together in his mind. He wasn't sure how he ought to feel about this man. No fucking kidding. But Taishan Jun didn't leave him time to ponder. Almost distraught with impatience, he unknotted the rope from around Chu Wanning's wrists and tugged Chu Wanning toward him, bringing a broad palm to the back of Chu Wanning's head. Agitated and infatuated, he pressed a fervent kiss to his lips. Taishan Jun's lips were cold as ice, but the flames of his passion were red hot. In the space of this impetuous, frantic kiss, a flood of memories from a bygone life seemed to merge and overlap. Their lips once again met across 2 lifetimes of fickle fate. These 2 people, 2 sets of fragmented, imperfect souls, kissed and intertwined their limbs once more. When Taishan Jun clutched him to his chest and kissed him, Chu Wanning's mind seemed to be simultaneously inundated and yet utterly empty, thoughts slipping through his fingers like water. But in the end, he could tell his eyes were wet. Right and wrong, good and evil, none of it was clearly divided, none so easy to discern. But as he kissed this man whose body would never again be warm, Chu Wanning knew one thing. Taishan Jun wasn't lying. Mo Run wasn't lying. He really had missed him. That's the end of the chapter. What? the fuck? The actual fuck was that? I yeah, yeah, yeah. Weren't we were supposed to go through 255, but it's 5. So we do not have time. We're on page 133 for chapter 255, which is called Confession. Because not enough has been revealed, you understand. We haven't learned enough over these past 132 pages. There needs to be a confession from somebody. We really need to get more information. Otherwise, it's going to start to get a little bit boring. And we're just going to naturally just start to lose interest. So it's about time for somebody to confess something and give us new, information to go on. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Okay. A real plot twist, like real plot twist, would be Chuaning having sex with Taisha and June of his own free will, which, as far as my understanding is now, would be weird and wild. And I wouldn't say that would be a thing that would happen. But again, this is becoming the motto of the Erha streams. I wouldn't put it past her. I don't know. I don't know anymore. I don't think I ever really knew, but I certainly don't know now. Liv, I'm gonna need you to specify, because Liv said that Taisha and June turns on Huabinan too. And not that there was much going on in the pages on this stream, but if you could specify, please, and refresh my memory, I'd be very curious to see, because that hasn't sunk in, really. There must have been something that flew over my head in that moment. Fujin asked, can revenants get it up? And really, it all depends on blood flow. So if revenants have flowing blood, then yes. If they don't, then no, technically speaking. So do we have any evidence of... He doesn't have... Like, he's a dead man, so presumably no blood flow. But, and he's cold, see? Zareem brings up a good point, though. Magic. Yes, that's true. We are also in Magic Land. So that may not matter so much. Oh, Liv says, like, what if Chuaning could make Taisha and Jun turn on Mo-Run and follow him? And follow him? Ooh. That'd be fun. Because, I mean, that's... Yeah. Taisha and Jun... Not that Taisha and Jun really wants to follow anyone. So I feel like the odds are better that he's just a wild card in general. It's like, who knows? He's not really of a mind to follow anything but his own whims. So, and impulse by design, but still. So actually breaking with Shiming Jean's instruction fully is actually probably pretty likely. It'd take a pretty cute trick in order for Chu Wanning to actually get Tae Jun to follow him. But again, this is Erha. I wouldn't put it past her. No, love, he says, oh, I thought you meant turned Hua Binan on. So did I. That's why I asked for clarification. Because also it's Liv, so the clarification was warranted. Ninin says, I love that we're discussing the logistics of dead man boners. Listen, we go where the material points us most of the time. It's not our fault. Not our fault at all. Especially if you go by Hua Binan logic. Okay. Past 5. Once again, I have to go absorb a shit ton of new information. Thank you, Meat Bun. I also have to go vote, actually. So I'm going to go. We are only approaching the midpoint of this volume, by the way. And this is a short volume. I'm literally never trusting a short anything ever again. Because really, like, you would never think. Like the longer volumes, those are the scary ones, right? No. The short ones. Always be wary of the fucking short ones. Apparently. I'm gonna go and breathe. Maybe. Possibly. While I vote. I'm going to be the most scattered person in the voting booth. I even know who I'm voting for. And I'm going to be the person in the voting booth thinking about, can revenants get hard? In any context in this story, is that a possibility? Because if so, it's not looking good for Chu Wanning. Unless Chu Wanning is also like a Mo Run is a Mo Run, but I don't think the Mo Run who we all know and love would see it that way. I think that would kind of fuck him up a little bit. The finer points of, who bangs who in this universe. That's what I'll be thinking of as I vote later on. I'll be here on Thursday at 2:15 for patrons and YouTube members to talk about whatever the fuck we just read. And then again at 3 p.m. to keep reading this sheer and utter goddamn madness and find out whoever is confessing what. Like, what's left? That's a terrifying thought. What's left? What little bit of something is tucked away somewhere that we haven't thought of in a while that's all of a sudden going to be pulled out and bitch slapped across our faces? Tune in next time and we'll find out. Please like the stream. If you had, if not a good time, then a time. And I'll see you guys in a couple of days to read more. I love you very, very much. Please have a lovely week. And I will see you on Thursday. Alrighty?